Gentlemen's rooms. It is now my very great pleasure and honor to more formally welcome Dr. Mohammed Ahmed Mait, Minister of Finance of the Government of Egypt. He is, when I was studying Arabic, we learned one of the early phrases was min kubar rigal dawla, of the great men of state. But he is truly a statesman, Ragal Dawla, who has had a long and distinguished career of public service. And AUC is about encouraging students not just to get jobs, but to serve their countries, their communities, their families, their societies, even the world. And so, Mr. Minister, your own career has been an inspiration to us all. And I might also say he is, again, an inspiration for us at AUC in the way we do our mission, because he is not only Egyptian-born and educated at Cairo University, but he was also educated overseas, having received his PhD in London. I have the note here somewhere. Was it City College of London? City College of London. And then, of course, came back. Part of, again, what AUC does, we say we're not in the brain drain business, we're in the brain gain business. We like to grow Egypt's human capital. Sometimes, many times, our students go overseas to continue their studies in science or the arts or entertainment or communications or the humanities, social sciences. But many of the best come back, and we have many examples among our faculty members who are with us here today, and indeed among some of our trustees who were educated at AUC and have come back again and again to Egypt. So thank you, Mr. Minister. I could recount just a couple of highlights. Not only is he the Minister of Finance who took office as minister during my own tenure here, just in the past couple of years. He had previously been Vice Minister for the Public Treasury, head of the Economic Justice Unit, first Deputy Minister of Finance before, and Deputy to the Minister for Pension and Social Insurance. He's first Deputy Minister for Health and Population, Vice Chair of the Financial Supervisory Authority, Chairman of the Egyptian Government Actuarial Department, Vice Chair of the National Organization for Social Insurance, on and on and on. This is a man who knows national finance and the way the government of Egypt does it. So I can't think of a more qualified public servant to be in the hot spot that you are in today. Any Minister of Finance in any country is in a hot spot in today's economy, buffeted by the global winds. Egypt has its own particular challenges and a time of serious economic reforms, Mr. Minister, at which you are at the pointy end of the spear. I was explaining to the Minister a bit about who we are. He knows us well. Thank you so much for the amount of time you've spent with us and even on our campus in the past. We've had a lot of interaction just over my tenure and before with the ministry, and again, since Minister Mayet has taken over. We are proud to be one of Egypt's leading foreign investors, not only in bricks and mortar, but way more importantly than that kind of capital, in Egypt's human capital. We are a not-for-profit. We are seriously not profitable if you think of profit as dollars and cents. Our profit goes out the door with every graduation, and we're really proud of that. It is building human capital, mostly Egyptian students, but students who also go back to the United States of America or to elsewhere in the region and help build their countries and their societies. That is our role. Our profit is growing human capital, and the people you see at each table we've tried to have trustees around are people who give not only of their time, but of their personal finances as a gift, because they believe in this mission, they believe in this great country. We've been here 100 years. Mr. Minister, you're kicking off the final weekend of a year-long celebration of the centenary of our foundation. There are festivities. If you were able to stay on campus, you would see the Student Union doing international food festivals. We have musicians and street performers. We have an amazing show at the library going on. It's a big moment for us. We'll be concluding Monday evening with fireworks and celebration reception here. And Mr. Minister, we'll see you again on Monday at the Prime Ministry as we conclude an update of our protocol, a very important protocol between the government of Egypt and AUC, which defines our status in this country, and it was, as you know, in a critical point, needing an update of interpretation. We're doing that in an exemplary way. We look forward to seeing you again when we sign that update, assuming the trustees vote to approve it, as I hope in the next couple of days, when we meet with your government at the highest level. Mr. Minister, I don't want to take our precious time. We look forward to your presentation, and when you've concluded, perhaps you and I can sit. We have a group of very sophisticated Egyptians and Americans who care about this country, who understand the problems and the challenges. More than that, they believe very deeply in this country's potential and its future, and admire the work you're doing. So, Mr. Minister, the floor is yours, and then we'll sit together and take some questions.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm very honored and very delighted to be here at American University in Cairo, and I would like to thank his ambassador Frank and Dr. Hatem for the invitation. And let me say that I very quickly try to give an explanation about what is the situation now in Egypt from the financial aspects and from the growth, and what we are targeting for the coming years. I'm going to give a speech. At the same time, I will explain everything on a presentation. So let me start by saying good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be meeting with you today at this distinguished event. Let me begin my talk today by taking you through Egypt reform story. Over the past few years, the Egyptian government has been in the process of implementing a comprehensive and rigorous homegrown economic reform program. The government has been implementing bold reforms to tackle structural imbalances and achieve macroeconomic stability. The aim was to achieve private-led, sustainable and inclusive growth, job creation, fiscal discipline, and social justice. Consequently, as a result of the rigorous implementation of reform, the Egyptian economy has shown significant signs of improvement. Let me shed light on some of the positive results in the real sector of the economy. I will start by the latest macroeconomic development and the physical development, and I end up with the external sector. Let me say how we moved with the real growth. I remember in year 2008-2009, Egypt GDP growth was 4.2. In year 2009-2008, we jumped to close to 5%. In 2010-2011, we went down to roughly 1.2, the year of the revolution. But over the last 5 years or 6 years, we started to pick up and move gradually. Last year, we finished on the 30th of June 2019, achieving 5.6%. This year, official target is 6%. However, let me say that we might be below 6%, but on the progressing target, so we will be between what we have achieved last year of 5.6% and the 6%. So in 2018-2019, our economy grew by 5.6%, making that one of the top growth performance amongst emerging markets. By the way, today we are number 6 on the world with regard to GDP growth. amongst the top growth performance amongst emerging market in the region and placed Egypt on upward growth path after a decade of sluggish and low growth performance. The economy continued growing in the first half of 2019-2018, reaching again 5.6%. So in the first quarter of 2019-2020, we achieved 5.6%, and our expectation is to be, as I said, between 5.6 to 6%, might be around 5.8%. For 2021, our target for GDP growth is to be 6.4%. However, let me say that we will have to adjust our estimate as a result of what is going on around the world. So, for sure, we will be between 6.4. We will announce officially what will be the target. However, in September, we issued the financial statement for the year 2021, targeting 6.4%. But now, with what is going on, we will have to look again at this target. So let me say, I think we will reduce it a little bit. It is also expected that the economy will continue achieving higher level of growth. We say that reaching 6% in the year 2020, and between 6 to 7% will be our over the medium term. So between 21 to 24, I believe Egypt target for the medium term will be between 6 to 7% real GDP growth. Let me say also unemployment. Unemployment started to be reducing. I think today the official figure was released with unemployment rate is lower than the same period of last year. So today, I'm not sure, I can't remember the figure, but I read the figures today. We are less than last year by 0.2%. So unemployment is in a declining mode, and I believe we were able to create millions of new jobs with all the projects going on. With that level of growth, we were able to create around 4 to 5 million new jobs over the last period. Improved growth in the upcoming period is expected to increase on the back of increased private consumption and the private investment, a further recovery in the tourism sector, and the operationalization of recently discovered gas field. It is worth noting that the economic growth has shifted to a healthier and more balanced structure with investment and exports becoming key growth. I like these figures because this figure says real GDP growth for Egypt is number 6. As you can see, Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, Philippines, China, Egypt. But by the way, India now moved below Egypt. If you look at the Economist of last week, you will find that Egypt now become above India. Philippines still above, China still above, but Egypt now moved above India. I would like to see how this is going because one country which I would like you to concentrate on, Ecuador, and I will tell you why. Look at Ecuador, and that level of GDP growth is minus 0.5. Remember this figure. Ecuador, last year, its GDP growth is minus 0.5. Let me say the contribution of contribution to GDP growth. As you can see, consumption used to be the main driver. In year 2013, 2014, the consumption contribution to the GDP was 4.5%. And as you can see, contribution of net export was negative 1.9. Contribution of investment was around 0.2. This was the situation 2013, 2014. Moved to 2019, 1918 or 2018, 2019. And we'll compare it with what is going on with 2019, 2020. Consumption reduced to 1.1%, but contribution of net export jumped from negative 1.9 to 2.2. And investment from 0.2 to 2.3. This was the case 2018, 2019. Our expectation for this year that consumption will contribute 1.2 and investment 2.5 and the contribution of net export 2.3. So it's more healthier GDP growth by a balanced contribution between different main driver of GDP growth. The development of investment and savings also on a positive trend. As you can see the figures for both saving as a percentage of GDP and investment as a percentage of GDP. Let me say, moreover, the realized growth has been well diversified across all sectors of the economy, including manufacturing, tourism, construction, trade, oil and gas, generating new jobs opportunities, which has driven the unemployment downward to reach 7.5% in June 2019, down from 12%, down from 12% in 2016, 2017, and it was 13.3% in 2013, 2014. Moving forward, the following are some of the highlights of the physical sector of the economy. Also, this is investment breakdown between private investment as a percentage of GDP and the public investment as a percentage of GDP. Let me say that this government is believing very strongly that the main driver of the future of Egypt will be private sector. And the main contributor to the economy must be the private sector for many reasons. One of the reasons that Egypt's population is growing very fast. We exceeded 100 million of inhabitants inside Egypt and more than 10 million outside Egypt. So who will create jobs for those? We have close to 1 million new entrants to the labor market every year. Who will be able to create jobs for those? With 2.5 million new babies every year. We are convinced it's only the private sector. So we have to do all what we can to ensure that this number of new jobs will be created and the private sector will be able to do that. So again, inflation, as you can see, is on a declining mode, and our target, the Central Bank of Egypt target for inflation, is to be 9% plus or minus 3%. I believe Egypt succeeded very strongly in achieving that. All our fiscal and monetary policy is concentrating to contain inflation. We succeeded in that. The IMF was ensuring that our policies in this direction to contain inflation is a significant element of our fiscal and monetary policy. Egypt risk profile also has improved significantly with comparison to the MENA region benchmarks. You will see that Egypt risk profile is in a declining mode. The Egyptian pound. The Egyptian pound appreciated from January 2019 to January 2020 by 12% or even more than 12%. And we cannot achieve that without a very strong and resilient economy. Reform. And by the way, one of the hardest time I've seen through my working as a vice minister and as a minister of finance, it was December 2018. Very difficult for many reasons. Number one, the federal increased the interest rate 3 times. And also, we witnessed that Argentina, Turkey, South Africa, and many other emerging markets with troubles. For these 2 reasons, the investors started to take their money back to the States. And we saw here in Egypt, $12 billion leaving Egypt over the period of September to December September to December 2018. $12 billion. And we were in the middle of the economic reform. So we were afraid the declining in our reserve and many other aspects will send a message that, oh, Egypt is in trouble or something, unless we are able to manage risk, to manage not only the risk of investors in bills and bonds, treasury bills and bonds, are leaving the country, okay? Some people will say, oh, Egypt now failed in its economic reform program. This is number one. Number two, in October 2018, we saw the oil increased, the barrel increased to $88 when our budget was prepared at $66. Number three, we saw that many countries around the world are increasing their interest rate. I saw by myself Argentina increased interest rate over the period of September to December to above 50%. We saw Turkey in one night increased by 7.25%. And we didn't want to increase interest rate. So, because we didn't have reasons for that. So, even inside Egypt, I saw the interest rate demand from the market reaching 22% when the budget was prepared on an average of 15%. With all this, we succeeded to observe all these strong shocks and to deal with them and to ensure stability. No one in the country felt anything unusual. Yes, our reserve declined a little bit, but all other policies were stable. And I believe the international market rewarded Egypt for that. When we started January 2019 to March 2019, we saw close to $10 billion coming back. January to March 2019, we saw closely to $10 billion coming back to Egypt to invest. And by the way, in December 2018, we were around $12 billion investment in treasury bills and bonds. Today, we are close to $25 billion investment in our treasury bills and bonds. Again, I believe many reasons helped to see the Egyptian pound appreciating, to see that there is stability in our monetary policy and foreign exchange. Moving forward, the following some of the highlights of the physical sector of the economy in 2018-2019. The overall budget also continued on a downward path to record 8.2%. Let me say, this is the domestic issuance market yield. As you can see, it is on declining as a result of containing inflation, as a result of the cut of interest rate. All of that translated on a better. Still, Egypt is attractive to the market because if you look at the rate of inflation and the rate of interest, you will recognize that we have 6% or even more real rate of return in the Egyptian market. Still very attractive with lower risk, as I've shown you. Also, it helped Egypt to do something which was very important. Some of the risks for any fiscal policy is the maturity period of our debt. Before, let me say, or even between 2016, 2017, 2018, the average maturity period was 1.9 years. So on average, our debt maturity was 1.9 years, which was a very risky for any investor to deal with a country with this level of maturity. But what happened? We transferred our debt from treasury bills gradually to bonds and longer term. So now we are 4% targeting to move to 4 years, targeting to move to 5 years, which is very good with international standards. This is number one. This is attracting Euroclear to deal with us in order to join Euroclear and our debt to be Euroclearable, I think, from January next year, and also to encourage JP Morgan index to include Egypt in its index. This is a graph I said I want you to concentrate on. On the green, at the bottom, you can see Ecuador, the best performing country in the world with the primary surplus, 2.7%, the best in the world. But don't forget, I told you, don't forget that with negative 0.5% GDP growth. Look at number 2. You will see Ukraine. But between Ecuador, unfortunately, Egypt is not, but between Ecuador and Ukraine, it is Egypt, 2%. Between Ecuador and Ukraine, it is Egypt, 2%. We achieved 2% primary surplus last year. But with this 2%, we achieved 5.6 real GDP growth. And this is the tricky, is how to achieve the second on the world as a primary surplus and number 5 or 6 on the world GDP growth. Because as you can see, number 1 on the world on primary surplus, Ecuador, is achieving negative GDP growth. Because what does it mean achieving primary surplus? It means you are trying to, what I can say, squeeze your expenditure as much as you can in order to achieve the 2% or something around of primary surplus. We didn't do that. We let the expenditure to continue, but we improved our revenue. And by the way, one of the things we've done is reform of subsidy. So it gave us a space. Reforming subsidy gave us a space. Introducing the VAT, it gave us a space. Many other measures improved revenue at the same time, rationalization of our expenditure. This is one of the most important thing and difficult thing to do, is to strike a balance between achieving a high percentage primary surplus at the same time high level of growth. And this is the reason why I said to you, remember Ecuador, because Ecuador was negative 0.5% GDP growth, but achieved the highest primary surplus in the world. Look at this second one. In 2013-2014, Egypt, primary, not surplus, primary deficit, negative 8.4%, negative 8.4%, which moved now, we achieved last year 2%, is not 1.9 by the way, it is 2%, the official figure. And this year, we are on the road to achieve another 2% primary surplus. Again, look at the overall deficit of the budget. In 2013-2014, we were at 16.5% overall deficit. This year, we are targeting to achieve 7.2% on 30th of June this year. 7.2%. And next year, our target will be, for 2021, 6.2%. In the following year, 4.9%. So in 2 years' time, we'll be below 5%, coming down from 16.5%, and keeping the 2%. So in the first half of 2019-2020, overall physical deficit was recorded at 3.8%, and it expected to record 7.2% in the proposed budget of 2019-2020 and 6.2% in 2021. This is on the back of the expenditure consolidation, continuing subsidy removal program, and better tax collection and revenue performance. In 2017-2018, and for the first time in more than 15 years, our primary surplus achieved the first primary surplus as 0.1% of GDP, but 2018-2019 achieved 2% of GDP as a primary surplus, and this year we are on the path to achieve another 2% of primary surplus. Total budget debt. On 30th of June 2017, for the first time of Egypt history, to get the peak of 108% the budget sector debt to GDP, the highest. But look what we did after that. We started with a debt management strategy to deal with that. On 30th of June 2018, we achieved 97.2%. On 30th of June 2019, 90.2%. On 30th of June 2020, our target 83%. On 30th of June 21, next year, will be 79%, better than before 2011. We were the #1 in the world to decrease the debt to GDP 18% in 2 years. 18% in 2 years. From 108% to 90% in 2 years. We were the highest to achieve that. So again, I think this is also a very good achievement. Looking at this level of a changing and the debt as a percentage of GDP compared to the rest of the world. By the way, we were #2 in the world with the appreciation of the currency after the Russian ruble, 12% in 1 year. As I said, reduction in energy subsidy helped us. As you can see, the total energy subsidy, which was 6.5% of GDP, is below 1% now. Total energy subsidy as a percentage of total expenditure, which used to be 20%, is now 3.6%. Investment to expenditure is improving as a self-financed, as a deficit financed, as a total investment. I'm sorry, this is repeated. Another graph which I would like you to see, this graph. As you can see, this is a different sector of our budget. The only point which we are working on, which I believe we have to address it more, is interest, debt service. The interest was 32.58%, has increased in from year 2015-2016 to 43% in year 2019-2020. This is the only negative effect, but we are addressing that, and we'll see in the coming budget for 2021, this will be declining. But if you look at other compensation of employees, which used to be 30.7% salaries. This is declined to 23.7%. Subsidies, grant, and social benefits, it has decreased for only one reason: removal of energy subsidy, electricity and oil. But for Takaful and Karama, which wasn't there before, we introduced it, and we pay now more than 18 billion Egyptian pound. Food and bread subsidy, which was around 30 billion, is now 90 billion. And the other subsidies and the grant are increasing, financing the health insurance and the other social elements. So you can see investment is improving significantly. As you can see, investment is with time is increasing. It used to be 6.2%, now is more than 10.3%. This is total wages, because we controlled how the exponential increase of wages. This is foreign purchase of T-bills and bonds. As you can see, the lowest was December 2018. The lowest was December 2018, 12.3%. Now is, at the end of January, is $24.9 billion. So the foreign holding of domestic government securities, the lowest was 9% in December 2018, now is moved to 12.5%. Bank investment in treasury bills and bonds. We like this one. Why? I tell you why. Because our banks was concentrating their money in buying treasury bills and bonds, and they didn't have space to invest or to encourage private sector. Now, with reducing the amount of money allocated from the banks for treasury bills and bonds, we believe they will have more space to push the economy. So it declined from 43.4%, now 30.3%. So it's a 13% decline of the amount of investment of our banks in treasury bills and bonds. Net foreign assets also improved significantly for our banks and central bank as well. Relative size of issued guarantees, we also controlling how much we issue as a sovereign guarantees. Although we are in a process of investing more and more in our infrastructure. As you can see, we are trying to improve our roads, tunnels, bridges, building new cities, improving electricity, gas. You know, all of that needs money, needs financing. So I may external. Let me say, quickly I'll move to this. External sector, oil trade balance now has improved also. Non-oil trade balance improved. Tourism receipt, also we are achieving good results with the tourism sector. Work remittance, it reached the peak in 2017-2018, but is still on a good level. Net foreign direct investment, which it is not meeting our ambition for that. We hope that in the coming period we'll be able to attract more net foreign direct investment. Total gross investment in selected sectors. I can stop at that very quickly. I will say something about in light of fiscal consolidation and broadened debt reduction strategies that has been enrolled in March 2019, debt trajectory is still on its downward path. Total budget sector debt, as I said, declined from 108% to our expectations this year to be 83%. Total budget debt is also expected to be 75% in year 2022. The government is targeting to lower the debt service bill gradually over the medium term through increasing the average term to maturity while lowering interest rates to reduce rollover risk. Moreover, the Ministry of Finance is working towards diversifying sources of financing between domestic and external sources to be broaden demand and in turn lower the cost of financing. Let me clarify some of the structural reform that we have implemented. We implement structural reform targeted to easing doing business, improving the bankruptcy procedures, enhancing access to credit, and promoting financial inclusion. In addition, efforts regarding tax administration reform and on diversifying and deepening of the revenue base are continuing. Reforms such as e-invoice reform for tax collection schemes, tax dispute settlement, e-filing, simplification of the tax declaration, and facilitating electronic submission, and the automation and modernization of the Egyptian Tax Authority have all yielding tangible physical results. Finally, let me finish by listing some of the reform and legislations that are in the pipeline aiming at improving the private sector participation in our economy. It is our belief that the private sector should be the main driver of our economic growth. The government has worked hard to create an enabling environment that would foster private sector participation in the economy and increase our industrial and exporting base. Some of the key reform and the legislative aimed at improving the business environment are as follows: industrial licensing law, the new investment law, the bankruptcy law, and the amendment to the companies law, establishing independent regulators for different sectors and separating the government role as a market participant from being a regulator, announcing an IPO program, issuing a new procurement law, enhancing the transparency and the governance framework of SOEs, state-owned enterprises, enacting new microfinance and movable capital laws, promoting mortgage finance, issuing modern regulations for many bank branches, internet banking and mobile payment, submitting small and medium enterprises draft law to the parliament, which finished from the relevant committee and going to the floor next week, terminating the foreign exchange arbitration mechanism, announcing export promotion scheme, and we have all other schemes. We've made the reform of our pension law, and also we have introduced the unified tax procedures law. It is in the parliament. Last week, the cabinet discussed the new public finance management law, which is going to go to the parliament. We are drafting new income tax law, and also we are making amendment to our VAT law, and the purpose not to change but to make it more transparent and resolving some of the dispute and some of the problems facing investment currently. We have many laws. New custom law, which I think Dr. Hussein is now finishing this week and submitting to the floor for discussion, I think very close. We have also amendment to the public-private partnership law, and also with Dr. Hussein finish it. And also we are making amendment to the law number 203, which is a governing law for state-owned enterprise to let the private sector come and participate for more easier. We have a lot. I can tell you about a lot of laws we are working on. The government will continue working towards endorsing aforementioned targets to enhance competitiveness of the Egyptian economy at large, while focusing on manufacturing and export-oriented activities, enhance competition and avail more opportunities for the private sector, while enhancing productivity of the Egyptian labor force. Let me say the last two things. We didn't forget our poor people and the middle class people, because they are the one who paid the cost and the price of the economic reform. I believe we introduced Takaful and the Karama. We introduced the increase in bread subsidy and food subsidy. We also increased every year increase in pension payments and salaries. And I know that All of that is not enough, but I believe the most important is to invest more and more in human capital development, is to invest in health, invest in education, invest in public utilities in order to reduce the burden on their pocket, because this is a good thing we can do for our people in return for the very harsh economic reform we have made. I think Egypt has made the hardest choice and the hardest economic reform in the world, but Egypt succeeded because of the Egyptian people who were willing to pay the cost of this economic reform. Thank you very much. Sorry for being very long.
Thank you, Minister. That was an amazing story, beautifully told, with lots of evidence, which we enjoy. As we begin this conversation, I avoided the risk of mentioning any names because we have so many distinguished people here. But in case others among our guests have not met those who are at the head table, trustees tend to know each other. I introduced yourself. You mentioned Dr. Hussein Isa, parliamentarian, chair of the Finance Committee of the Parliament, and over these past several years, we've been collaborating. He's been kind enough to give us good advice about how to not only comply with the law, but understand the law and make sure that we do things all in the correct way. Thank you, Dr. Hussein, for your service to us as well as to your country during this period. I'll mention also some colleagues. Dr. Ashraf Hatem was formerly a minister in the government and now is the Egyptian government's representative to AUC and AUC's representative to the government of Egypt as our counselor, formerly chair of the High Council of Universities, as well as the former Minister of Health. His daily contact with your government at so many touch points, so many ministries, including yours, has been absolutely indispensable to our progress, not only these past several years of his service, but going forward and looking there. Our chairman is with us, that you had met before. I mentioned that many of our trustees are, in fact, our alumni as well, and he and his family have their history is intertwined with AUC. He and both brothers, or one brother, studied here. One brother studied at AUC in the 60s, and their dad, who's also here. Tom Bartlett, are you here? Former president is the father of two of our trustees and is the former president of AUC. You see how AUC brings Americans and Egyptians together in lifelong connections. We have with us Salah Diab, also an investor, head of Pico Holding, well known to the Egyptians in the room, also as a leading public intellectual and influencer in Egypt, as the publisher of El Masri Al Yom, largest independent newspaper, and a columnist therein. And Mahmoud Abdullah, I have to confess, a personal old friend of mine, an Egyptian-American businessman who holds up the best standards and now is a member of our leadership team, helping us make sure we have the most compliant, best management operation where we minimize our risk in all of our operations. And on all around, full of faculty members who understand what you're saying, and I hope we'll have some very trenchant questions. I would mention you touched on Takaful and Karama. We're very pleased that one of our faculty members, Hania, I don't believe is here today, with her husband Ziad as a trustee. Hania Shola Ani worked with Ghadawali, former minister. We claim her as ours. She studied at AUC also in developing those programs, contributing a lot of the social science that lay behind how to protect the lower ends of the population, even as you go through painful reforms that can be painful, especially at the lower end, used to subsidies. Mr. Minister, if I could take the privilege of the first question, then I'll rely on this very astute audience to carry the conversation forward, tease out some more of the themes. You made really clear the trend lines. In this room, in a couple of days, we're going to be affirming our budget for next year, and we have to make lots of guesses about exchange rates, lots of guesses about inflation. We look hard at our own costs and how to contain them, how to sustain quality while keeping our costs under control. I may ask you a second question after about how this applies to your higher ed industry and the public sector in particular. You made very clear you expect the pound to continue strengthening and inflation to continue heading down. Dare you hazard a guess at numbers for the next fiscal year? A year from now, can you make a wild guess? You're not a prophet, you're merely a minister. But we have to make guesses. And if we hear it straight from the minister's mouth, we'll feel more confident. So give us a guess on the foreign exchange rate about a year from now and a guess at the inflation rate. Headline. Push the button so it turns green. There you go. Just click it and click the button to turn green. Or use this one. أو تفضل.
I believe the drivers of high inflation are now reduced significantly because if you look at the period of 2016 until 2019, what were the main drivers? Number one, you were removing the oil subsidy. So this is one. You were also removing significantly the electricity subsidy. This is number two. Number three, the devaluation of the Egyptian pound, which was 8.88, something like that, which went up to 19, and now it is taking at an opposite direction. Number four, I believe our ability to make available all the needed goods and services, because there were shortage in sugar at some time, shortage in medicine at some time, shortage in potato and the lemon in some time. So all of these were driving inflation. For what we've seen over the last year, I believe these main drivers are no longer at the same extent. So goods and services are available. The Egyptian pound appreciated, which was affecting prices of many goods. I believe also the removal of oil subsidy is now no longer, because you have this committee which review prices every 3 months, which takes a decision when prices change. But let me say, we did our budget for 2019-2020 at an oil barrel price 68, and today is 57. We did it at a dollar to Egyptian pound 17.4%, something like that. The current price now is 15.7, for example. So again, I'm talking scientifically that the level of inflation we've seen were driven by very clear factors. Yes, on the other side, you may say, oh, but you're still growing at a very high population rate of growth. But our figures also show that fertility rates is on a decline path. I believe with all these issues, we might, our production of vegetable and fruits are now increasing, by the way, and we have a surplus to export. So all of that gave us some sort of comfort that level of inflation, the target level of inflation. And I said, our target very clear, 9% plus or minus 3. So now we are on below 9. So our target will always to contain inflation within this range. So whatever policies will be needed to keep this target, we will do it.
And you've shown that you've been successful in this past year, and so we'll be very, as to inflation, I couldn't pin you down on a prediction, but that is good on the inflation thing. We'll take that as a firm commitment. The government of Egypt, you've said this publicly, you're targeting 9%, and you'll do whatever it takes to stay within plus or minus 3 points of that. Got it. FX, you're not gonna give us a guide on. In this room, when we work on our budget in 2 days from now, 1 day from now, tomorrow, what should we guess? Because we have expenses and income, both things. What should we, just as a rule of thumb, 16, 15,
For
15
the
and a half?
Egyptian pound?
Over the coming year, to the dollar.
Of course, the first answer I will say, I'm not a central bank guy. But I would say that I've heard many speculations from international entities who might say, oh, our expectation for 2020 to continue in the range of 15 something. So look, the calculation and the figures can guide us because, yes, everything can change. But let me say that as long as the sectors are bringing hard currencies, are performing well, I believe we are on a good path. So looking back, what are these sectors? Tourism, oil and gas, let me say also Egyptians working abroad. Let me say that our economy is attractive to foreign investors who will transfer money from abroad, like the situation now from 12.3 December 2018 to now $25 billion. I believe if all these elements continue to perform well, so we are in safe hand. Otherwise, it will happen otherwise.
Mm-hmm. We think you are in safe hands. Among those hands is our alumnus and friend, Governor Tariq Amr, whom we're very proud as an AUC alumnus. And he has many people in his leadership in the central bank who are alumni, so we are in good touch. But I'll take that. The government of Egypt has traditionally had a policy of defending the strength of the pound. And one of the things you had mentioned early on was, if I heard you correctly, you said it very quickly in a long list of your ambitions for further reforms, is to see the pound float more completely float and less of a managed float. Again, I know it's Governor Amr to speak with, but from an Egyptian economic policy leadership perspective, is it the outlook of the government of Egypt that a relatively strong pound or a globally market-based pound is in the national interests? So that's what we should expect?
A market exchange rate, which can go up and down, is our policies. This is number one. Number two is this is what we agreed with IMF, is to be market-based, not to be managed, is the market. Okay. And by the way, if you look at, again, the last 3 months of 2018, you will see that the dollar was appreciating gradually against the pound. Go back to the last 3 months of 2018. You will see the Egyptian pound moved from 17.3, 17.4, close to 18 at this time. And by the way, if the reverse didn't happen beginning of January, definitely this would have continued. But because the opposite happened, and from January 2019, we've seen investors coming back with a flow of billions of dollars. So I think somebody, if you would like to comment, you are from the banking sector. My friend here, he can comment about that. He's from one of the leading banks in the banking sector, so he can give another. But I'm sure that currently there are a lot of liquidity, for dollar liquidity in the market, and I believe this helping the strengthening of the Egyptian pound.
It's really important for us. Let me ask one more broad policy question. Probably the most frequent touch point, the most frequent visitor to our campus, and the one with whom Dr. Ashraf is most often in contact, is Dr. Khaled Abdel Ghaffar, naturally, as the Minister of Higher Education. It's really clear from him and from President El-Sisi's speeches and conferences that he does that it's the policy of the government of Egypt to invest in the education sector, to promote even private investment, and to encourage foreign universities to open branch campuses here. We're very happy as AUC to say, we're not anybody's branch. We've been here 100 years. We're certified by the government of Egypt, Naqa'i, Egyptian quality standards. We meet American quality standards, certified by the Middle States Council on Higher Education. We're glad to serve as a kind of poster child for the government of Egypt in showing that this is a place where the national government has a policy of encouraging investment in education. Beyond that, I was, when you were presenting the chart showing public services and declining budget for salaries, where do you fit the national education? Where does that figure in your national budget? Can you, top of your head, how much of it goes to higher education and K-12 education? We're both ministers. Tariq Shawqi, one of ours, faculty members on leave to your government, is leading K-12 reform. Do you wish to comment at all on any of these things, how the government sees the public education sector, the private education, international investment therein? Anything you're doing to facilitate or encourage? There is no one like us. We're a category of one, right? A truly not-for-profit, foreign yet Egyptian entity. I'm not sure you'll ever have another thing like AUC. But any comment, as we're planning our own investment in the future, we're launching today and tomorrow and the next day a planning process to build more right on this land, to invest more in education in Egypt. Any words to inspire us or help us decide as we go forward?
Let me say that we are very much interested to have more private investment in education in Egypt. Again, with a country of more than 100 million Egyptians, with a country of increasing population of 2.5 million every year, with a country who have problems with investment in education, the alternative is to encourage private investment to absorb some of our people which we are not able to provide them with education, particularly quality in education need financing, need money. So let us talk very frankly that for a decade, the government was deciding to subsidize energy, subsidize oil, and subsidize electricity instead of investment in health and education because they don't want to upset the public. But as I say, eventually we're going to upset the public. Upset them on the right direction is much better. Upset them now, but save the future. But we didn't do that. We didn't want to upset our people, cars, tanks, because we used to put our money in the tanks of our cars. This is Egypt money sent to the people who owns cars. But eventually, you were not able to build new schools. And as a result, we've seen classrooms with 90 pupils. We've seen schools working 3 shifts. We've seen teachers leaving the school to make private lessons in order to earn more money because you were not able to give them good salaries. This is the result. Now, it's a time to change that. So you need to invest more to build new classrooms. You need to invest more to improve the management and also improve the income of our teachers. It will take time. It will need money. So how can you save that? Let the private sector partner with us to do that. So definitely Egypt will need more investment in education. For us, you've asked, where is the education? Normally, as a budget, you have sectors. Sector number one in the budget is for salaries. Yes, our teachers and our doctors don't get good salaries. And this is one of the reasons why teachers leave the classroom and go for private lessons, and doctors leave the public schools and go for private. Let us face the reality. You want them to come back, you have to, number one, educate them well. Number two, train them well. Number three, give them good salaries and good environment to work. Because when you say that I have 90 pupils in the classroom, how can I teach that? I graduated from Faculty of Commerce, Cairo University, when we used to sit down with 3,000 or 2,500 students in one stadium. It's impossible to have time with our doctors to see. We need to change that, but you need money. You need to have money. I believe Egypt now have the money. I said sector number one. Sector number two is the money when you, use it for operation. You need to buy materials. You need some. Also, we don't have enough to give them to get good materials for education. So we need to invest, allocate more money for education. Sector number four is grants for school. Is not enough. Sector number six is for investment, is to build schools, to build playgrounds and all of that. Again, you don't have, let me say, the time to inject all this money at once. It will take you some time to do that. At the same time, you don't have the time because every year, 2.5 million coming. They need education. They need schools. They need teachers. So let somebody come with you to ease the pressure. I think, no, definitely. And there is no shame for having the private sector with us. Private sector might, provide type of education for some class of or segment of the population who will, match their needs. Why? I'm coming from public school and coming from public university, but if the government can provide good public school and good public university to the majority of the population and the segment with high income will go for private, fine. What is the problem for that? Mm-hmm. Let us do it. Eventually, there is one Egyptian citizen which have got a good education and he will contribute very well to his country, whether inside Egypt or abroad.
Absolutely. I take that all as very encouraging, that not only is the Ministry of Higher Education and Basic Education focused on that, but that you see this as a public good. In other countries, there are tax incentives. In every country, education is considered a public good, and governments often appropriate large amounts of money, as this government traditionally has. In some countries, especially the United States, the UK, some others, there are incentives to private taxpayers. They get a tax break if they contribute to a wide range of socially good causes. Education in the United States is one of them. The American private educational system is one of the leaders of the world, in part because those of us who pay high taxes get a break. We have the choice of giving our money to the taxman or giving it to an AUC. For example, we're a 501c3. We're a registered charity in the United States and about to be in the UK. I don't know whether in your conception, Mr. Minister, you see the possibility in future of setting up encouragement of people to contribute actively to private education, not-for-profit. I underline, we are a not-for-profit.
This is the point.
You don't have other not-for-profits, I think.
This is the point. If it is not-for-profit and any profit will be reinvested, I totally go with that. But this is not always the case in Egypt.
Exactly.
When you are making profit, and you are making the profit from the Egyptian citizen, no, you have to pay taxes.
Pay taxes.
But if it is not in profit, and any profit will be reinvested again for education, I'm with that.
Thank you. One of our best friends in your ministry, whom we respect. She's fiercely loyal to her country and doing a great job, is Dr. Samia, who's with us this afternoon.
Yeah.
And we work with her to make sure we pay the taxes on anything that has to do with outside people who are profiting. But we are not-for-profit, and any income we have goes right to educating those students and to the research that backs that. So we appreciate your recognition that we're a category apart when it comes to function in
Totally
Egypt.
Let me be very frankly with you. We have many who are making profit, and education is only for profit. And we regret for that, because education should not be for profit. But again, if you are making this for profit, okay, you have to pay
Sure.
tax. But if you tell me I'm really not for profit, and if I have surplus, I will reinvest it to expand my investment for education, definitely you have to have the privilege of tax exemption or tax.
We hope others will follow our lead, because we have a very successful model as a not-for-profit in higher ed, and would love to see that. We don't think of it as competition. We think of it as would love to see it grow into a sector after having planted the seed over 100 years, and we mean to make that take root over the next 100 years. I've just spoken what's on my mind, I know on the minds of many here, but Mr. Minister, if you have a few more minutes, may I ask that we open this to some of our colleagues, and especially faculty members. I know we might even have a few students who are here. I'm not sure how to make, since you mentioned Mr. Isa, why don't Yusuf, would you like to, from CIB?
He will tell us now about, will give us an answer to the questions you've asked me.
Well, it's a great privilege to be here. Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, actually, for the wonderful speech. From the side of CIB, let me just confirm everything that you said. Yes, investors are very, very happy with investing in Egypt. They have been for the past few months. And as a matter of fact, over the past few months as well, we're seeing the quality of those investors change. Previously, they were just short end of the curve, long strategies with carry trades. Over the past couple of months, we're seeing duration get prolonged with long-only strategies. So the quality of investors are improving, and everybody, I guess, believes in the story that you have been telling. So let me, of course, congratulate you on this story. I'm very happy that CIB believed in that story 3 years ago. We went out and collected a lot of deposits. We convinced our board risk committee to invest in that story that you have told while reforming the economy in 2016, late 2016. And as a result, our shareholders have gained significant wealth. As a result of that, we added 60 billion Egyptian pounds of market capitalization since the start of the reform program. So good private sector story. We now trade at higher PE than some of the largest US banks. Some of them are represented. So thank you for that. Now, quick question. I know that you're a strong supporter of the relationship with the IMF. So if you can tell us, please, the recent story. There's been recent talk about renewed negotiations or discussions with them. The IMF over the past 48 hours said that Egypt needs a new set of, what do they call it, reforms or an agenda. And the speaker from the IMF said over the past couple of days. So if you can comment on that, please, where do you see the relationship with the IMF going forward? And then another quick question, with the appreciation of the Egyptian pound and the local inflation being higher than our trading partners, local manufacturers are facing increased competition from importers. And that, of course, is putting pressure on their production. If you can please comment on that, if this is something that concerns you or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Isa. And he's a friend of mine, by the way, where I was with him, member of the board of directors of Egypt Air Holding Company for some time when I was vice minister. I wish to continue, but they don't allow minister to continue. I hope to come back. By the way, my belief is that if you want the world to believe us, to believe Egypt, we have to continue in a disciplined way, regardless of anything else. But if we don't, they will say, oh, you were disciplined when you were with IMF. And when no more IMF, you are not disciplined. No. We must be in a disciplined way. We put the targets, we put the strategies, we have to continue on that. As I explained to you here, our target as a fiscal policies to continue 2% primary surplus, to be on a declining trajectory for the overall deficit, to be below 5%, and to achieve in 2-3 years' time the 75% debt to GDP. And also our policies of reform on both fiscal and monetary to continue, and to have a very flexible and modern economy with a lot of diversification and all the sectors contributing to GDP, to our economic growth, to be effective. But all of this will require a very deep structure reform. Very, very deep structure reform. This is number one. Number two, we need to change all these societies to be digitalized, to automate their procedures, to be less bureaucracy, to ensure that our laws, regulations up to the international standards, and to be friendly to investors, and to be encouraging investment, to be attractive for investors, not to be the opposite. And also, we need to ensure that with all of this to continue economic reform, because it's a dynamic process. Look, if we don't do that, our economy will not be resilient, will not be able to be dynamic, will not be able to observe shocks. With any shock, you can break down. But as long as you are dynamic, you are reforming, you are continuing facing your challenges and continue addressing them, you have contingency plans for everything. Whatever shocks you will face, you will be able to address and to continue. We would like to see that the international world see Egypt as a country who in 10 years' time from now, another South Korea, another Malaysia. And they say that. They say if Egypt to continue on what it did the last 3 years or 4 years, it can reach that, but it must continue. For people to believe us, we have, as I said, to be disciplined and to show them that we are able to continue on that. This is number one. Number two, sometimes you need independent auditor who will tell the world, yes, I'm confirming what these people are saying. And I believe the IMF is the independent auditor who can play this role, because whatever we say to the world, they may say, oh, we are trying to say nice words to let you happy with us. No, I need an independent editor. If you are not afraid of anything, what is the problem? So we are continuing discussion. We know what we have to do. We would like to do it with IMF. And I believe we've met many times, and we are continuing discussion.
Also very encouraging answer. I saw Jim Bond is our senior-most trustee. We're honoring his service here. He's been with us many years. He has a background with the United States Senate as an appropriator, so he knows about public funding from a legislative perspective particularly. Jim, I've seen you've had your hand up. Please.
Mr. Minister, thank you very much for your talk. It was very informative. I actually have a sort of a parochial question reference to AUC. You know, when we stood out here, gosh, now 12 or so years ago, this was entirely desert, as far as you could see. One of the things talked about, however, when we started to put this campus together, was that there would eventually be transportation and public transportation, complete the subway out here. And in your talk, you mentioned government is increasing its investment in infrastructure, and I'm hoping that maybe one of those infrastructure projects might just be the continuation of your subway system out to the new administrative capital with a stop here at AUC. Is that on the short list?
I will talk to our transportation minister to ensure he will do that. Our monorail is taking passengers from Cairo to the new capital, but I am not sure about the way to the new capital, whether it will go through the AUC campus or not. I will ask the minister. But I know it was very important to have the monorail to go to the 6th of October and to go to the new administrative capital. We are investing hugely in both the metro and the monorail. And this is one of the issues. Some people are saying, oh, from where you've got all this money? You are building for 14 new cities, including the new capital, expansion of metro, new monorail, and all this network of roads, tunnels below Suez Canal, and bridges, as you can see, the Heliopolis and Masr al-Jadida and all of that. This is the tricky point, is how you manage in order to grow. You manage in order to grow. And growth is not only growth, it's job creation. It's job creation. And this is very important for Egypt. Egypt needs every year, 1 million new job every year. Unless you have projects and the project, you will have problem. And this is one of the reasons, if you check today the release of unemployment, you will see the unemployment this year is less than last year. Yes, we may not be perfect, we may not be fantastic, we may make mistakes, you may dispute with me, you may disagree with me. However, you cannot disagree with me about what the international community say about Egypt. You cannot say that I'm presenting a very good, because when you look at the reports published about Egypt by the IMF, World Bank, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Bloomberg, and even the rating agencies, look at the region we are living in. Most of the countries around us, their sovereign rating is coming down. Egypt either stable or it goes up. So again, I will talk to the Minister of Transportation to ensure we'll address this point. But yes, we need to have a more and more expanded network of metro and monorail. Particularly that with going to the new capital, you will need such type of transportation.
Maybe we'll bring it up with the Prime Minister as well, who has a background in this, when we see him on Monday. It's been published, actually, Jim, that the plan is still to go here with Mahattat AUC out there.
Good. So good news.
Inshallah. Now, we've already kept you overtime, Minister. I really would be remiss if I don't invite one of our faculty members to probe here. We like to brag a bit. We think we have the finest faculty in Egypt, and we have only
I'm with you as much as you want.
Thank you. If we could, if there's a faculty member has a comment or a question to register, and then I'd like to give a little souvenir, and we can release the rest of the people, and maybe if you can hang around a bit after. Anyone from the faculty? Dr. Atala? Samra Atala? Or you can take this one.
Yes. Thank you for coming all the way to New Cairo, and giving us this presentation. I'm an economist. I'm going to turn 46 next month, and I've seen a lot of episodes of successful reform in Egypt. And I really like a couple of points that you addressed. One of them is the resilience of the economy to external shocks and the good quality of jobs. So my questions will address these two. The rebounds of our economy relied considerably on tourism, on foreign inflows of investors in debt instruments, and on remittances. In my opinion, these are factors that are subsistible to external shocks considerably. Would you guarantee someone who's 46 that I would not see another episode whereby an external shock in tourism, in debt markets, would affect us negatively moving forward? The second thing is, a couple of months ago, the CAPMAS, the authority on statistics in Egypt, released its latest round of labor market survey. And all the indicators suggest that the job creation is not of a good quality of jobs. There is a decline in the job participation in the job market. People are moving more and more to the informal market, whereby their wages have stagnated in real terms. So how can the government ensure in a way that our job creation is in a sector that adds value, that increase our export competitiveness, so that we become more resilient to external shocks? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe the 2 points are linked, because I joined as a vice minister March 2016, when at this time tourism sector was zero. And when we were planning the budget, the president always says to us, put zero for the tourism sector. It can go peak in one day, it can go bottom one day. So don't plan accordingly. Prepare a budget with zero. If it brings something, good. If it doesn't, we have no problem. Since then, we do the same. We do the same. We have to say, in September 2016, our reserve, our hard currency reserve, was below $13 billion. At this time, we were in a very bad situation. Tourism sector was totally collapsed. Totally collapsed. We continue without the tourism sector from the time we've made the program with IMF until, let me say, beginning of 2019, tourism sector was not contributing. However, our hard currency reserve was around $45 billion. Let me say, I agree with you totally that if Egypt wants to continue resilience, it has to concentrate more on different industries, and in particular, manufacturing. This is the future of Egypt. If Egypt wants to ensure stability and ability, stability in its economic situation, and the ability to observe any shocks coming.
Mr. Minister, we could keep you here, and with your permission, if you can linger, Dr. Hussein.
I'm very proud by the results we have in these experiments for the last 3 years. And I hope that in the next 2-3 years, we will change the whole Egyptian budget from traditional budget by items into performance-based budget. We have a very important visit to IMF and World Bank in last September with a delegation from Minister of Finance and Minister of Planning, and we, as you mentioned, independent auditor, we submit our results and submit our methodology to apply this type of budget, and the results are very positive, and they said that you are even very more speedy to have these procedures to goes into performance-based budget. I think to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of our spending and our resources, this experiment, which has just 3 years, will have a very important and positive results in the near future. And I think that this experiment has representing a full synergy between the parliament and the government to apply this, I can say this, one of our dreams to apply this type of budget. Thank you so much.
Can I make
Please,
a comment?
please go ahead. Tell Marwa to come back.
What Dr. Hussein said, I believe, is one of package of many measures. This is a significant measure which we have been doing for the last 2-3 years, but also for the first time in Egypt history to have what is called treasury single account. Egypt finance used to be managed by 63,000 independent accounts within the Central Bank of Egypt. We transferred this to one treasury single account for the whole of the country. This is number one. Number two, we changed how we manage our budget from paper-based to electronically based. And now we have what is called GFMIS, Government Financial, GFMIS, Government Financial Management Information System. When we canceled from Egypt history what is called the governmental check, now it is an electronic payment order, and this saved Egypt billions of pounds. Why? Because you manage the budget electronically, and each minister, governor, head of public organization has a screen in front of him. He knows secondly, every second, what is in and what is out, what is the situation for his budget. As a ministry, as a governorate, as anything, which again doesn't allow anybody to exceed what is allocated for his ministry or his government in the budget. Otherwise, he has come back to us and ask for permission. Before that, anyone can spend, and at the end of the year, when you are making the financial accounts, you will find that many has exceeded their budget. It's no longer. And our tax authority is going through a significant change, although there are a lot of challenges now and problems now. But if you look at last year, January last year, we introduced for the first time what is called electronic tax reporting. So you don't need to submit hard paper, just electronic, and that's it. And I believe now we started with IBM and SAP companies to automate all the tax procedures. So you don't need to go to the tax office. You do it by yourself on the internet. And also with Microsoft, we started a very ambitious program for electronic invoice. So all invoices will be electronically. This is B2B, and now we are talking with another company to have what is called B2C electronic receipt. So even with the custom authority, we started single window to automate all the procedures for export and imports. We finished with Cairo Airport. We are working in Port Said now. And by the end of this year, you will see a very huge change in how our imports and export are managed electronically, with advanced cargo information is in place working. My feeling is that by June 2021, Egypt will be a different country. Thank you very much.
This is really exciting. Thank you very much. Inspiring. Mr. Minister, we'd like to give you a small token. It's well within the ethics limits, I can assure you, that we can give you. But I ask you not to tell the Prime Minister, however. You can tell your tax authority. Dr. Samia is here. No, because, well, actually, we should talk about, this is by AUC Press. This is actually the first presentation copy. Our trustees are just arriving. This is the first event of our annual trustees meeting in Cairo. This is a special centennial edition of 100 Stories for 100 Years, telling the story of our first 100 years here. It's my pleasure to give this to you, even before we give it to our trustees. Thank you very much. produce those once every 100 years. This one, we produce every year. We update it. This is something we're very proud of too. It's much more modest. It's paperback. This is called AUC in Service of Egypt, where we try to just give a kind of thumbnail summary of some of the things we're very proud of doing, not for Egypt, but with Egypt, with your government, with the private sector, with the great national universities of Egypt, our student activities in the neighborhoods. There's just some of our things we do in service to Egypt. I hope you'll enjoy that as well. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. I don't know if the minister can linger for small chit-chats on the side, or if you need to run your... I'll see you out. By the way, our students are out in our campus. Student Union has put on international food.